Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Gaming, and a follow-up. That's right, because a few weeks ago, I posted a video, a Name This NPC competition, because I've been getting in the habit of drawing illustrations, sketches really, portraits of NPCs that appear in the games that I'm running, specifically for my local gaming group. I run far too many games to draw NPCs for every single one of them, but for my local gaming group, for Cold War Cthulhu, that's what I'm running right now every single week, I draw the characters that they are meeting up with. And I end up, when I'm bored or I have a bit of time on my hands, I'll just sketch and sketch and sketch and come up with as many different characters as possible. Sometimes I will base them on characters I've seen on TV or in video games. A lot of people recognize the character from I Am Not Human in my set of NPCs, one of the not humans. But what I did in that video was post a wide array of character portraits that I had drawn, but for whom I had not assigned names or biographies. And I put it out there for viewers to comment. Pick one of these and come up with a name and a bio for this character. Even better if I could fit them into my Cold War Cthulhu game. If you do so, and I decide that your one is the best, well, I will make a video of your choosing. But we have a winner, everybody. Eli Vasquez is the name of the commentator. And Eli posted the name of Yusuf Arslan for character number 11 in that setup as a young man, headstrong and prideful, looking to find his own way in the current Turkish period of turmoil, where my game is set. His family, wealthy through the textile industry, saw a future for themselves and Yusuf, despite the growing political and militaristic instabilities that seem to be festering. Yusuf, however, desired a life of excitement and adventure, and with the political landscape looking more and more rocky, what better way to get his fix than to enlist in the military Turkish land forces? His father obviously objected, but Yusuf was able to convince him that enlisting like this would bring honour to the family name and add prestige to the family name for business purposes. Although Yusuf's relationship with his father was fairly straightforward and normal, one could say this was the first time his father showed true pride in his son, which only emboldened his choice further. It goes on like this. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can find it over on the Name an NPC competition. Now, I am suspect of some of these, some of the posts that I got, some of the responses to this competition. I think some AI may have been used from here or there. But in terms of Eli's, I awarded Eli the number one, and I decided I would make your video. You requested a video on the subject of ideas, tips, and tricks for STs, GMs, DMs on how to foster atmosphere, ambience, and mood for horror games, and some tried and true methods you've used to great success. It's a good video topic, so here we go. If you want a video of your choice, please pick up a copy of The World Below, now that it is available on DriveThruRPG. It is linked in the video description below. And if you pick up a hard copy, get in touch with me via MatthewDawkins.com and request a video. That is all you need to do. Alternatively, if you don't want a new RPG, then please support me on patreon.com/MatthewDawkins. And if that doesn't work out, go over to MatthewDawkins.com, where there is a link to PayPal. You can just request a video by sending me some dollary dues. In this case, it was a competition, and Eli wanted to know about fostering atmosphere, ambience, and mood for horror games. And as I run an awful lot of horror games, I can tell you that I find the scaring players one of the easiest things to do at this point. Scaring and revolting. I've said before that there are various emotions you can try and elicit out of players in RPGs. I think fear is one of the easiest. Fear and revulsion are very easy to get across. Excitement can be pretty easy. Laughter. The rarest is genuine joy. And I'll make a different subject on that at some other point. Genuine joy and probably sorrow. Those are the ones that can be hardest to tackle, because some people just do not engage with RPGs on those levels. But fear, horror games, I think is something a lot of people can get behind, even if they don't want to. How I foster the atmosphere of horror is in part through description, And I mean, you can't be too heavy-handed with description, because if you get too expository in your GMing, people will start switching off. No one wants to listen to a storyteller just ramble on and on and on, despite the fact you're watching this video on and on and on about the ooze that's running down the walls, the malevolence in the bad guy's eyes, the brown mist that's seeping in through the ventilation shaft, how it makes you have flashbacks to your childhood and so on. Now, each of those things independently is good, but start putting it all together and you're going to end up with a group of people who feel like they're not involved in the scene. So, yes, description is very, very potent, especially if you can start teasing people's olfactories. You know, when you start telling people how something smells or tastes, that is a very good way of provoking a reaction. Another way is, of course, by, if you are fond of it, I'm not too fond of it, mood lighting, mood music. I don't find that that really helps as long term. I think people just get used to it very, very quickly. But description is vital, but interaction is better. What do I mean by interaction? Well, yes, smell and taste are great, but touch is a sense that most people neglect. Now, you're not going to go around molesting your players, but their characters are going to have to interact with the thing that you are describing to them. It's one thing to describe a Shoggoth. It's another to describe how it feels to touch one, or be absorbed by one, or be separated by one and split into multiple different bubbles, different amoeba, all fully conscious, despite the fact your foot is over there and your head is up here, and between them you have a hand, another foot, a stomach, and so on. And you can really get into this when you're talking about touching something that is singularly unpleasant, something stiff and hairy, something wet and sticky, something smooth, but when you try and take your fingers away from it, there's a tacky adhesiveness. This isn't something you can do every single time, but describing how something feels can immediately make a player recoil. That makes the player recoil, it makes their character recoil, and that instigates a certain natural fear. Now, I mentioned all those other elements that come into description, things like the ooze running down the wall. Now, you liken the ooze to something that is relatable. There's no point saying alien blood is running down the wall. No one knows what alien blood really looks like, or they might have an idea of acid from the Alien movies, or green blood from Predator, or something like that. But if you say something like a viscous fluid oozes or crawls down the wall in a way that makes it appear as if it contains life and it's desperate to reach the ground. It oozes in thick globules that pause occasionally to coagulate and grow in size. You're sure at some point one of them is going to drop. When they sit there, sticking to the wall, they seem to swim with an uncanny life inside of them. The colour is like pus or mucus. It's green, but it's light, it's pale. It makes you feel sick just to look at it. Now, I probably wouldn't go with that, because I think having something running down the wall on its own isn't terribly frightening. But you do that, you say that, and then the bubble bursts. The bubble that is stuck on the wall bursts, and all of a sudden the air is filled with the stench of... and you choose your appropriate stench. You know, you can go for rotting meat. A lot of people will know what rotting meat smells like. I find it's better to go for fouled dairy, because I think a lot of people have occasionally opened a bottle of milk and found that it's gone off. So, yeah, it smells immediately of milk that's been left out on the counter for a couple of days too long. That smell sticks to the roof of your mouth. And you go from there, but you don't need to over-egg it. You know, rotten eggs as well, very common. Things that are relatable work. It's less scary to have a villain, to go back to the malevolent gaze, to have a villain staring with baleful eyes, because that sort of thing is written all the time. What is a baleful gaze exactly? A lot of people are going to imagine Christopher Lee or some other horror movie staple, but they're not necessarily going to feel scared by someone staring at them. When you're getting into describing a villain's appearance and you want that to evoke an atmosphere of horror, you again need to play with the uncanny. You need to play with the familiar and yet detached and unnatural. So this person's skin crawls as if it wants to escape them. His eyes swivel wildly in their sockets. I find that using words like eyeballs and sockets is often better than just saying eyes. Eyes in their face, eyes in their head. No, eyeballs in their sockets swivel in his skull as if they can't fix on a specific location until finally they stop, fixed only on you. Now that is a baleful gaze. You're not even having to use the word stare at that point. If something seems constantly squamous and moving and unnatural, when it stops, that's the time to be frightened. And when it comes to things like, I don't know, you can move on to, let's think, flashbacks. Flashbacks are a very good way of instigating horror long term, and they really work for games like Wraith the Oblivion. They really work for games like Locust, which I've talked about on this channel. Things where characters are dealing with traumas and sins, things that they have experienced in their past and now they're having to live through again. Flashbacks are an excellent way to instigate horror, but also create investment in a character's journey, because if it is something they relate to, if it is something that they have experienced before, that atmosphere suddenly feels more oppressive. If, for instance, to use a really, let's say, a real trigger point one, but let's go with it, let's say Cult Divinity Lost here, and in Cult, a lot of you will know if you've listened to my Red Moon role-playing Cult actual plays, they get very dark, very incredibly oppressive. And if you go for something like, and this is a big trigger warning here, child abuse, you don't have to play through child abuse. You shouldn't, I would suggest. There's not much to be gained from doing so. But if you have a character in play, a player character, who sees an NPC, and when you see this NPC, it takes you back to your childhood. You're 7 years old. You're sat in the park. You're alone. You're waiting for your friends to turn up. Your mum just went to the shops. All of a sudden, a man sits next to you. He has a strange odour about him. He smells like fish sticks. And he starts talking to you. And there's something about his voice that you trust. It's smooth, like caramel. And in fact, in his hand, he's offering you some toffees or sweets. And he says, "Don't worry, it's our secret." And he shovels a little closer to you and shares a giggle. And his giggle sounds childlike, which is unusual because this man is so much larger than you. And he says, "Hey, do you want to see something really cool? It's just over there, through that fence." And I don't need to go any further. It's unsettling. It's unsettling and it makes you feel unsettled. And that is, in fact, where you could end the flashback, because now, going back to the future, going to where our player character is now, you see a man over there. He's wearing a heavy plastic Mac. You don't recognize his face, and you can only just... There's something familiar about his voice, but it's when he brushes by you and you pick up that smell of fish sticks again that you realise you've seen this man before, you've known this man, you've heard him, you've felt him before. That's a different kind of horror. But it's very effective, and it's very much a poison you have to be selective with, because not every single player is going to get on with it. That's why things like lines and veils and trigger warnings are good, because some players would utterly freak out with that kind of thing. So there's lots of ways you can get into it. There's loads of ways you can play with horror, whether it's through description, whether it's through interaction. And again, I go back to that idea of touching something or experience something that you've experienced before. Don't play on the player's fears as you know them. You know, if you've got an arachnophobe at the table and they are genuinely freaked out by spiders, don't go on and on and on about spiders, because no one's going to be having a good time unless you're a sadist, and unless they're a masochist, they're probably not going to be having a good time either. But knowing the difference between what a character gets freaked out by, and that can then move on to the players. You're not trying to scare them off so they never come back. What you're trying to do is excite them in the same way as a roller coaster or a haunted house excites them. They should want to come back to experience that frisson of thrill again, not be driven off because you were too scary. So finding that blend of being a good descriptor, or being a good describer, if that's a word, giving them things to interact with that are going to feel unsettling, playing with flashbacks so their characters feel invested. That is the key, I think. Real horror, good horror, more than shocks and jump scares, comes from familiarity, comes from playing with a character who you don't want to die. You don't want this character to die. I once played in a game of Chronicles of Darkness. It was a zombie apocalypse style Chronicles of Darkness game. We were all humans, and it was the Walking Dead, Dawn of the Dead, any other zombie apocalypse movie or TV show. And instead, and in front of us, each player had some bullet casings. The storyteller had brought along some shell casings from some discharged bullets, and they were representative of the number of bullets we had, each of us. And whenever we fired a bullet, we got rid of the bullet. We got rid of the shell casing. And it provided a really strong, tangible way of feeling fear, because there weren't more of these to be found. This was not America. We couldn't just bust into a gun shop. This was set in Britain. We didn't have ammunition lying around all over the place. We had what we started with. And yeah, as it ran out, our hopes ran out as well. So that was just a really fun way of doing it too. It's like if you're playing vampire with blood points, have little red gems out instead, little red stones, instead of counting them on your sheet, and it really makes it more effective. Anyway, that's me on horror and how to instigate it. Thank you very much for watching, and you know where to go if you want to request a video of your own. Till next time.